All right. Hello and welcome to the AWS Made Easy Ask Us Anything live stream, episode number 17. And this is our behind the scenes episode. We're really excited to share this with you. How are you doing, Raul?
Doing very well and really excited about the episode today. I think this has been a long time in the planning. And we wanted to get it just right to present it to all of you. So couldn't be more excited. How was your weekend, Stephen?
Oh, really good. Just really relaxing weekend. The kids were getting over a little bit of a cold, so they're back in business now. How about yours?
We had a really awesome weekend. We went to this national reserve called the Nagarhole National Reserve, which is in the state of Karnataka. Beautiful place. Weather was just absolutely awesome. And we spent the weekend, did a safari. Yeah, it was overall fantastic. The unfortunate thing is I've kind of contracted a extreme case of laryngitis. So I'm glad I'm not the one speaking for the most part today.
No.
But would love to quiz you on all the stuff that's happening. I think this is going to be a really fun topic today.
Well, that sounds great. Well, let's get into it, and then let's see. For some reason, my connection's a bit fuzzy, but is it coming through okay?
Yeah, it seems to be coming through just fine.
Okay, great. Well, in that case, I'm going to queue up the first segment, and then we'll get right into it. So let's see. Here we go. And then what I'll do after this, I'm going to share my screen, and so it'll just be a totally transparent process. Okay, here goes. Okay, so you notice it said a What's New review. Now, that's intentional. This isn't a What's New review segment. This is a behind the scenes segment. But I wanted to show you as part of how the segments get generated for that part. So I wanted to make sure that we use that very process. Okay, well, let's start with...
Why don't we just start by telling us a little bit about all the different phases that go into producing this live stream?
Sure. Well, I guess I'll go through the different ideas, and I'll share my screen. Actually, let me do a real quick behind the scenes here. So what we do in the live stream, we're streaming on StreamYard, and then off to this. So I've got my main monitor here, which is you, and then off to the side, I've got some notes that I want to go through, and so I'll just bring those notes onto the stream so we can kind of do this in real time. But one of the different phases that a stream goes through, it's basically let me share this window. Share, and here we go. Bring this onto the screen. Move that StreamYard out of the way so we don't get that recursive effect. So stream goes from planned to scheduled to ready, recorded, post-processed, highlighted, finalized, and completed. And it seems a bit excessive, but I got to the point where I was sort of tracking all these different pieces of the stream. And then I wrote down, the full flow chart of how it works. And it ended up being quite involved. So I thought, I have to manage this. So let me see if I can share this, the flow chart of how the stream process ended up looking like. Because when we first started this, I was doing everything manually. We do the live stream, all the preparation manually. I thought I need to do a brain dump of exactly what's going on. And I ended up with this flow chart here. I don't know how visible this is.
It's pretty tiny. Can we zoom in a bit?
Here we go.
To that.
Here we go. So I thought,
by the way, even in full zoom, it looks super tiny.
Well, that's exactly the point. Is I got to the point where we have this stream and it's going through certain stages. It starts with planning, and then when we go from planned to scheduled, it means that we've got a date locked in, we've possibly got a guest locked in, we know what episode number it's going to be, and then when we go from scheduled to ready, it means that we're ready to shoot the live stream. We've got the event made. And so that's what these little tick marks are saying, is all the different bits of data that I need to gather up along the way. I'll zoom in here. And then when we we do the stream and it's recorded, that means we have a URL of our live stream that's, our live episode 17.mp4, which we'll have at the end of this session. And then we want to post-process it, which means we chop it up into different highlights and segments that we share out onto social media. And so that I'll show you what that looks like. If we go, and this is a shout out to our own AWS Made Easy channel, but if we go down to AWS Made Easy, so we see that throughout the week, we distribute these highlights. So this is you and I were in Anaheim.
Yeah.
Talking about the config that we went over this article, that's adding 20 new resources. This is the Rekognition article that we went through. And so we bring out these highlights throughout the week. And then finally, at the very end, everything is completed, which means we're no longer tracking it. And so I kind of wrote all this stuff down and I was managing this all in my head. And I thought, okay, well, we need to automate it. Plus, we're programmers, right? So if it's anything we have to do that's more than once, we have to automate it. Now, in general, I'm using this tool called ClickUp, and we can get into that a little bit later. But you can see my ClickUp. We can think of ClickUp as like a programmable Kanban board, and it moves a stream through these different phases. And then basically, the way I think about this stream is that for every phase that we talked about, we're saying, okay, do we have data to move into the next phase? If not, then it'll kind of kick me back.
So it's basically a simple workflow.
Exactly. It's just a workflow tracker. Yep. But the cool thing is I can stick a webhook during any point in the process, and that webhook can then call out to an AWS function, a Lambda function. It can call out to a dev flow, which we'll talk about in a little bit. It's really flexible. And so that way we can enforce processing certain data at each segment, at each transition.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. In fact, I think automation in general, just talking about automation, I feel like it's a really cool way to document complex processes and complex systems, just because English as a language is probably the worst way to articulate these systems. Every time I've looked at a wiki to look at how to do something, I have never managed to get it to run. I invariably need to call up a developer or have them come online so that we do a joint session and they walk me through exactly what that text meant I was supposed to do. So automation couldn't be a better way to document all the complexities around these workflows, processes. Even if it is just to be done occasionally, it's still worth documenting it in that form.
Well, I agree that even especially when it's done occasionally, then I'll talk about this later, but I don't know how many times I've retaught myself AWS SAM because I don't use it often enough to have it, burned into my L2 cache of my brain or even the RAM of my brain. It's in my, the Glacier part of my brain. And so, that restarting that process every single time, it's just often enough where I think I know what I'm doing, but it's not often enough where I'm sure I know what I'm doing. And so I've put a little bit of automation around that. So that way I don't have to think about it every single time and I could just know that it works.
Couldn't agree more.
Oh, well, so I think that kind of makes the case for the automation in terms of live streams. Do you have any other questions about what we're doing, or should we go on for the next one?
No, why don't we go on to the next one?
All right, so then I'm going to trigger transition 2. Okay, so I see it. I had to one thing ClickUp has done is it's reshuffled the order of my transitions. So I'll have to deal with that in a moment. That's really strange. Okay. So in terms of tools, what we use, so I use ClickUp, as we said, for this is like the Kanban board. This is the issue tracker. This is what's
Can you
tracking
zoom
my
in a
stream.
little bit on it?
Sure.
It looks super tiny.
I've got the okay.
Yeah.
So we'll go over it as we get to a new stream. But the idea is, I've got a list called live streams, and in that list, I've got two what we call sub lists. One is called streams, and one are called LS tasks or live stream tasks, and those are associated tasks with the stream. And so, if I wanted to make a new live stream, here I'll show you what it looks like for episode 16 that we've done recently. Okay, episode 16 is in the post-process state. It's got a few segments that I can review. Let's look at episode 15. Okay, so episode 15, we've made a few segments. We've made a few highlights from those segments. We've made social media posts from those highlights. There's one here where I'm still fleshing out the design of the thumbnail. So we'll get that, make sure that gets posted, and then that will get promoted through the process. And they all tie back to this stream process. And so the stream process, it says, okay, this is a task of type stream. It's episode 15. Here's the title. Here's the LinkedIn event that it said. Here's our promotional image for that episode. Here's the recording of it in an S3 bucket. Here's the show notes that came out of that. That popped up on my different window, so I'll move that here. Here's the show notes where we talked about each thing that we did. So this is kind of a one-stop place to manage the stream, and all these fields get populated as the automation progresses through.
Yeah, this is a pretty neat way to document all of this workflow.
And so the part that I really like, and we'll get through. So if I go over to streams, and I can go to automations, and this is saying, okay, if I change the status, let's look at this automation. So this automation is saying when the status goes from planned and then it advances out of the planned state. Oh, this is saying if I don't have this episode number, then kick it back.
Yeah.
But then I'll have another automation that says, here we go. This is where it gets interesting. When the status changes from planned to scheduled, then it's going to call a DevFlow webhook. And we'll look into this DevFlow webhook in the next one. And so it's saying, well, now that I've actually nailed down a date, well, let's automatically send out a Google Calendar invite. So the tools we use to manage this, we use ClickUp for the management, use DevSpaces as our IDE to code all these. And then DevFlows is our automation tool. And we can talk about that. That's a tool for wiring up AWS services together. We're going to use AWS Rekognition. We use StreamYard for the streaming, and then ClickUp for task management. Now, 1 second here. Again, this is behind the scenes. In our StreamYard, I've got these transition tasks, and I noticed that somehow transitions 3, 4, and 5 vanished. So I'm going to put these back in so we can actually queue them up. There we go. Transitions 3, 4, and 5 are processing. Okay. So should we go on to the next bit of the conversation here?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go ahead.
Let's do it. Okay, cool. So we saw that transition 3 ran, and that's what we're saying. For segment number 3, we want to talk about scheduling the live stream in Google Calendar using DevFlows. So I'll open up this DevFlow here. Now, I really like this tool, DevFlows. I think what you said earlier, it's about documenting the automation. And in this case, it's saying when something happens. The best way for me to document things is a flow chart, right? If you have some really big, technically correct, philosophically complete document that painfully, textually enumerates every edge case, it's painful. Whereas this is a pretty simple flow chart of exactly what's happening. So just to zoom in, it's saying, so here's the other end of this transaction. Here's a webhook that comes in, and I'll go to the edit view here. So this webhook is going to come in, and then some of the data that's going to be there, I've used this reshape tool. Let's look at the configuration here. I have an event coming in, and the event has a body. And in this body is going to be guest email, appointment start date, appointment end date, appointment summary. Those are what's going to come out of that event.
Yeah.
And then I'm sending this to Google Calendar. And so in this Google Calendar, what I'm saying is I'm setting it to, okay, I'm experimenting with the times here. I'm giving it the appointment start date and end date. And this is conference call to plan the meeting for the live stream. And then we can populate a Zoom one. This is there's some personal information in the production one, so I'm showing a demo one here. But yeah, the important parts here are the start and end date, and that gets translated from the incoming webhook into something that Google Calendar can then use to put something on a schedule. So if we try that, let's show how that works. So let's go back to this view here. We'll go filter, and I've got a demo episode here in our live stream view. Episode number 9995. Okay, so right now it's in the planned state. And if we lock down a scheduled date, so let's schedule this hypothetical episode for tomorrow at 7:45 in the morning. Okay, and then if we advance this from planned to scheduled, then this webhook is going to get called, and it's going to say, okay, take this. The webhook will get called, it will get a date, and then it will translate that date into one for the live stream, and then the other one for the live stream minus 24 hours. I've got a JSON audit in there. I just heard my Google chat ping, and then so I should look on my calendar now, and I will get behind the scenes. This will pop up in a moment. I'll get oops, let me just turn off that calendar. This will pop up in a second with the appointment. Let's see if I can refresh.
So while that's coming up, I just want to talk a little bit about this new paradigm,
please.
Which is what DevFlows is kind of pushing. So this is what has been known as the flow programming paradigm. One of the big changes that has happened out there is that as the cloud providers have been providing this amazing set of services, the new skill that developers need is not so much about writing code, but more about stitching together these services to achieve the outcomes that you want. And in those kind of scenarios, I think the most readable, the most well-structured or well-architected solutions are the ones that are best represented by a flow, because invariably there's data that's flowing through and transforming through all of these different services. And what you need is the right way to visualize the way the data is actually flowing through all of these different endpoints. So it's not so much about writing code, but about how you're stitching these together. And that's where I think flow programming and DevFlows as a platform comes in really handy. It's a pretty neat platform. We'd love to create a bigger deep dive at one point of time on DevFlows itself.
Yeah, I really enjoy, and just to show the kind of the power of it, you can, here's an incoming webhook. You can say, okay, well, what do I want to do after that webhook? You can attach it to, you can do a bit of math. You can post it to Google Chat. You can manipulate that and have it feed S3. There's lots of different options. All right, well, let's go into the next one. I really like DevFlows, and like you said, we'll do a deep dive on it. But this is just showing one little piece of that puzzle of, okay, we have a live stream set up. We want to make a planning appointment, and we want to make sure we pencil in the live stream appointment. and then we can inject the StreamYard URL, which you're going to need, into that Google Calendar. All right. Well, let's go on to the next one, which is then making the segments. All right. Okay.
So you got a bunch of voodoo going on with this one.
This one's cool. I'm really, really happy with how this one works out. Okay, so let's look at our test episode number 9995. And then again, since this is a behind the scenes, I'm just going to have usually I have my notes off to the side, but I'm just going to do it right here. So what is a segment? This is cool. Now, a segment is a pre-planned thing that we're going to talk about. So as we've been talking throughout this live stream, a segment is, okay, here's a discrete piece of the conversation. We know ahead in advance what that's going to be. Now, we generate this little video transition. And what we're generating that video transition for is for Rekognition to later chop up our video into different segments so that we don't have to do that manually. So that's what I was doing for the first of 12 or 13 episodes, was watching the episode in advance, taking a note of the time in milliseconds that it started and ended, and then making the highlights from there. But that was a really painstaking process. And then plus Rekognition has, well, we'll talk about what Rekognition is later, but the idea is we basically want to make our show so that it's really, really easy for Rekognition to discuss when we're talking about different segments. So I think what I can do is just show you how it works, and then we'll go or show you what it does, and then we'll go through how it works. Okay, so here's our live stream view. We've got this demo live stream number 9995, and then in that demo live stream, we want to, let's say that we wanted to talk about some segments that we wanted to talk about. I think I wrote this down here. Let me do a different filter so I can show you this one. Greater than 9900. Okay. So here's another test episode that we've made. And we have these type of segments. So let's make another segment that's basically the same. I'll show you what the test episode looks like. So I've got a test episode that starts out with our standard introduction, and then I pull up a segment, and then we talk about something on the browser window, and then another transition plays. And so I want to generate these videos for these transitions. Okay, so now that I think I've set up the problem, let's go ahead and do it. So let's make a new task, and let's call this segment. We'll call this the intro segment. And we're going to call it a task of type segment. It's going to be episode number 9995. And this relates to our streaming segment, stream, excuse me. This is our test stream up there. Okay. Okay, so here's our test stream with new transitions that we're making. That's our, here we go, demo stream, sorry. Let me filter this back to equals 9995. Okay, let's make our segment. So we're going to make a segment in ls tasks, segment, introduction, YouTube DL has a JavaScript interpreter. Okay, so this is of type segment. It's episode number 9995. It is associated with stream task of demo stream. And then we're going to call this segment title YouTube DL has a JavaScript interpreter. Okay, let's create that task. And so that's going to show up here. Now, if I make this view a little bit wider, right now this is an open task. We don't have anything. But then what I can do is if I advance this to in progress, it's going to then call a webhook, which is going to give us one of these transition videos. So if we refresh this, refresh the ClickUp UI, and you should get it back fairly quickly. It might take another second or two.
And usually, Stephen, how many episodes or how many segments do we create in our 1 hour video?
So it's usually about 6. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So now it came back, and here's what I've got.
That looks pretty neat.
Yeah. And so what it did is, again, with automation, I've got within the LS tasks automation, I've got an automation which says, when this happens, okay, generate transition video when segment goes from open to in progress. And this is calling this, which I have to change now. It's calling this Lambda function URL. And so what all that does, well, it's actually an interesting pattern that evolves. Let me go back to this view. So I found that when we have this automation that uses this webhooks, we actually have to do this 2-step pattern. Now, usually automations, they want to return instantly, but it takes a few seconds to generate this video. And so what we end up doing is the first Lambda will push a task to SQS. And then the second Lambda function I'm allowing that to take the 10, 15, 20 seconds that it needs in order to generate that video. So that's what we're doing here. We generate this segment, and later we want to say, okay, this is the segment order. This is going to be the first segment in our live stream. We can say, okay, is there an article that we're discussing here? Let's see if there's an article that we're discussing. I had this in my notes here. Yeah. We're gonna discuss this article here. Article URL there. And this is, and in the segments also, once we've discussed the segments, sometimes we rate them as either simplicity or complexity. And so this is where I'm tracking that after the fact. I'll say, okay, this one is simplicity, and then we'll give it our number of clouds out of 5. And so I'll put this here. Okay, so that's our segment. And so what we do is once this video gets generated, we then go into StreamYard, and we have to populate. So just sharing this here, these are the different segments that we populate so that while we're talking, we can then queue those segments. So showing you the source of that code, again, I know it's a bit. Here we go. Let me open this up here. I have another window here that has the Lambda function. Give me 1 second. Okay. My green window is the one that has. I thought I had refreshed the session, but it had expired.
And once you get that working, Stephen, can we zoom in a little bit into that?
Absolutely. Here, give me. I'm going to need to use my phone because I'm going to need to use my MFA. So give me 1 second.
Always
here.
the best practice. Use 2-factor authentication.
All right. And my phone is also my camera. So excuse me for 1 second. Authenticator 242609. Okay. There we go.
And we lost you, Stephen. We lost your video.
There we go. So that this will be a separate behind the scenes, but what the camera does is it runs this thing called Camo, because my iPhone camera is so much better than a webcam, and so I just use that as a camera. Okay, so here's my Lambda function that's really doing all this stuff. It's calling this API called ShotStack, and so ShotStack basically takes a JSON payload that represents the video that we want to make. So what it starts with is it starts with this blank transition template. It starts with this blank transition template, and then there's this big spot right here. And then what the Lambda function does is it gets the right data out of the task. It says, okay, here we go. It gets the right data out of the task and then injects the title into that video. And then this Lambda function has a longer timeout. And then here is where we update the ClickUp custom field to have the URL of the video. And so then once that populates, I can then download them and populate StreamYard. I don't forget to do that. Because I've done that, several times when, oh gosh, I forgot to generate the transition videos. We're going live in 5 minutes. So that's having the automation done is really, really helpful.
Yeah. By the way, even though this seems like a live stream and might seem like everything is happening, as it happens, that does happen as well. But there is a ton of planning that goes into the structure of each show. We do plan for a lot more than we actually get through in every episode usually. So that planning is incredibly important if you want to do a show and, keep it interesting.
Oh, I really underestimated it, but now that we're in the streaming world, I've seen some ratio of minutes of live contents to minutes of planning, and it's like 1 to 20. Or 1 to 50. It's a lot. This one, we're showing all the live stream, all the automation that went into it. But anyway, I think so. What we end up with when we do all these transitions is we'll have this live video that StreamYard will give us a recording at the very end of it. And because these transitions have these black frames here, this is what will then give us our highlight detection, which we'll demo coming up. All right. Well, anything other questions for the segment generator?
No, this seems really cool. The fact that you can actually take a base template and then just insert all the specific headers and it generates all the standard segment, markers for you. That's pretty cool.
Now and just as a little shout out, this is the API is called ShotStack, and they have the cleverest advertising that I've seen, because what they actually do is they publish a ton of how-tos on how to use FFmpeg. And then what you realize when you're reading this is I'm never, ever, ever going to be able to get this right, scripting this together. FFmpeg is so fragile. And at the very end, they're just like, oh, you can just pay us a couple bucks and we'll do it all for you. Here's a JSON payload that you can do. And yeah, scripting FFmpeg is I'm glad that they've done that, and I'm happy to pay them. And it goes with our stitching things together, right? Don't invent it yourself.
Exactly.
Stitch together an existing service. I don't want to know how many special edge cases they've dealt with, but I'm happy to share that cost with all the other ShotStack clients.
Completely agree.
All right. Well, let's do a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to show dev spaces to deploy Lambdas with function URLs, because that's been a really handy bit of this, especially with these automations. When you want a quick webhook, Lambdas with function URLs is the way to go. So let me trigger this break.
Public cloud costs going up and your AWS bill growing without the right cost controls? CloudFix saves you 10 to 20% on your AWS bill by focusing on AWS recommended fixes that are 100% safe with zero downtime and zero degradation in performance. The best part? With your approval, CloudFix finds and implements AWS fixes to help you run more efficiently. Visit cloudfix.com for a free savings assessment.
Okay, cool. So in this segment, I'm going to be a little bit more generic, but when we're talking about automation, a lot of times, like I said in the previous moment, you want a quick function to exist in a way that's callable in public. You have a little bit of Python code.
Yeah.
It's really just applying a little bit of logic and updating something somewhere. And that's a pretty common pattern. And so you want a function to exist somewhere that's publicly callable. Now, it used to be, Lambda's been around for a long time, but then making it public involved API gateway and dealing with cores, and it was a bit more involved.
IAM. Don't forget IAM.
I deal with IAM. So luckily, there's now a cool thing called Lambda function URLs, and the idea is that you can deploy a Lambda function, and then right away you can deploy a Lambda function, and then it just has a URL, and you can easily select your authentication mechanism. And I usually just have it open, and the fact that the web, I don't publish this URL is kind of the security I need for these webhooks. So what I did, I made a template for how to very, very quickly deploy a function to Lambda. So I want to show how that works. And this is using dev spaces. So the way that this works, again, I mentioned earlier, I always find myself reteaching myself SAM, reteaching myself some of these things, because I don't do it all the time. So what I wanted to do was kind of automate this process. So what's the easiest way to get some code public? So we've got this repository, and I'll put this in the chat. But it's called SAM Lambda function, Lambda Pi function. And the idea is I wanted to make it as easy as possible to have a function made public. So let's start this with eyk.devspaces.com. Now what this is doing, it's cloning that repository. And then I've got my dev spaces set up. So I have my AWS environment, my credentials that work with SAM are already built in. So if I want,
the thing is, you're not setting this up on your bespoke machine.
No,
this is available and identical to literally anyone out there who launches this dev space.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Anyone can use this. They can just clone this and say, okay, you have to make sure, and it's documented right here. You want to make sure that you have your AWS access key ID, AWS secret access key, a default region set, and then you're going to want to set this environment variable, which is the name of your stack. And I'll show you how this works. It's pretty cool. So if you look at the dev spaces, and I'll be very careful with what I show here, but within my variables, I've got access keys that are context sensitive for different projects. And what I've set it up is that for all my projects that start with SAM, I've got a certain set of access keys that are pre-programmed in there. So when I fork this repository, I can just call it SAM something else. And then I've already got the right access keys built in. Now I've got one setup step here that takes a little bit longer. Here we go. I'm waiting for this one step to finish. I should have moved that into the base image of that, but this has been a busy process. So let me pull up CloudFormation while we're waiting for this to finish.
So the nice thing about DevSpace is that on startup, it'll pretty much install and deploy and do whatever else the grunt work with compiling and deploying your applications is. And it'll do that for you without even, setting up a, terminal and then getting it all to work. So it makes it really simple and standard to get started. Looks like it completed.
Yep. Yeah, it's all set.
So you're trying.
So say I wanted to deploy some function. I'll make it really, really easy here. Instead of hello world, I'll say hello dev spaces. And it's automatically going to save. And then I'll go back to the documentation because I always forget what I'm doing here. And say, okay, I've got those three variables get defined through my dev spaces config. So all I really want to do is I can do here. I'll call this the hello dev spaces stack ./build.sh. There we go. And now it's kicked off a, what's going on here? User dev spaces EYK. 1 second here.
You don't have the right user here.
It should have been. Let me check my environment really quick. I have to hide the screen for a second.
No problem. And by the way, for the audience, while Stephen is trying to get this to work, check out DevSpaces at devspaces.com or devspaces.devgraph.com. It's a pretty neat tool where you don't need to set up your local environments. You can take any application, get started with coding. It's probably the only environment out there that supports ARM-based instances for you to, deploy all of your development stuff. And it is all on AWS. So if your resources are running on AWS, there couldn't be a better mechanism of, deploying your development environment, coding over there, testing it, and then literally doing a pull request right there and setting it off for deployment or production. So it can be beautifully integrated with whatever CI/CD mechanism you have. It all operates via your GitHub or GitLab or whatever Git-based solution you have for your source control. It's really that simple. So give it a shot, give it a try, or reach out to us. We'd love to get you set up.
And we're back. I guess I hadn't rotated those keys through, but yeah. So there we go. Right away, it's doing this change set, and it's doing this create, and it's creating this this whole SAM template, and you can see it in CloudFormation. I'll refresh over here. And there we go. This is creating in progress the Hello Dev Spaces stack. And again, all we did, the only change we made is we modified this app.py, right? So that little bit of business logic that you wanted to throw in there, there it is. And then as soon as this finishes creating, we're going to get an output, and the output is going to, oh, there we go. I can refresh that.
Almost done. Yeah. Now it should.
Check out the resources. This is the last thing. It's of course, yeah, the last one.
There
it is. So now I've got this endpoint, and not the most sophisticated bit of code, but look, this took just a few seconds, and we've got a publicly running bit of Python code that's right there on AWS. And you've got your whole config saved. You can commit this back, and it's just done. So really happy to be using dev spaces for a lot of these bits of automation behind the scenes.
Yep. Oh. And I have to admit, AWS Lambda function URLs are currently my favorite service because it makes stitching together multiple services together that are tied with some Lambda glue code so easy. That you can deploy. You can just literally take any functionality, deploy it as a function URL, and that's now available to you to stitch together as part of a larger chain. So, yeah, couldn't be more delighted about function URLs.
And what I'll do, I'll modify this template here to be a proper GitHub template, or you can just fork this and populate your own environment variables within dev spaces. I'll have to update mine. Yeah, but all you have to do is fork this, set your AWS keys correctly, and there you go. You don't have to go through that whole process. You don't have to install SAM CLI locally. You don't have to make sure that you're running the right version of Python locally. No local setup at all. So I really like that. All right, well, let's go to the next segment. And I can see already that we're going to have to do a part 2 and maybe part 3 of this behind the scenes series. But let's keep going here and let's see where we get. Okay, here goes. All right, now I'm going to turn off the camera on ourselves because we're about to get this recursive effect. Oh, that's not too bad. Okay, so here is StreamYard. Now, StreamYard is what we use to stream with, and we'd love to get someone from StreamYard on the show eventually, just because it's such a really useful tool. So you can see right now we're streaming to LinkedIn, to YouTube, to Twitch, to Twitter, all simultaneously. All those transitions that we've made, we've got them up on the side. We can talk about. We can also we can inject other things into the stream. So when Raul and I talk about an article, we can give it 4.5 clouds. Oh, and I forgot about my other banner that I made for the previous segment. So you can really have a lot of fun in StreamYard. It's made live streaming really easy. The first live stream I did that was for a different event, I tried to do all this custom work in OBS, and we came to the Q&A session, and everything was in the wrong place, and it was really hard to manage. And so StreamYard is a lot less flexible than OBS, but it's one of those, like, it just works. Once we started using it, we haven't had to think about it. It's been really nice. Yeah, it would be really nice if they had an API so I can stack this deck automatically and put it into my transitions, but they do not have an API at present. So
I think we could do something like a Selenium script or something like that to kind of do this in a headless manner.
That would be cool.
Yeah, I think that's something to try out. But just recollecting, didn't we do our first episode with OBS?
Yes,
and
exactly.
Really struggled with.
Yeah, so OBS, it worked really well until we got to the live Q&A at the very end. And what we were trying to do is we were trying to use Zoom and then screen capture parts of Zoom and push it into OBS. So like with StreamYard, and again, I'll show you, I've got my stream deck over here. And if you look over here, I've got buttons programmed in that represent different StreamYard views. And so if I want to switch, let's see if I can do this here. If I want to get rid of the split screen and just do group, I can hit this, and we're there. Yeah. And then I've got, so this is really there we go. Go to cinema mode. We can talk about the article. And so I've got this kind of by my right hand while we're doing the live streams. So that's a stream deck, and it pairs with StreamYard. And I've got some macros programmed in that will switch the different views. So I've got a little bit of control over it. I always think back to that Back to the Future when Emmett Brown is looking at the Sony Handycam. He says, "This is a portable television studio." I think this is like a I don't know, a TV station as a service. So I'm very happy to be using this.
If I'm not mistaken, for the first episode, Stephen, I think you had most of your family being part of the coordination, and production team.
Oh gosh, my brother was moderating the live stream, and StreamYard gives you everything all in one place. It's really neat.
I think we had like 4 people behind the scenes who were literally just making sure that all the other pieces were being scheduled and showing up at the right time. It was quite a pain, and I think we've come a really long way since then.
Oh, it's been really fun, and I'm excited to do a behind the scenes episode, in 6 months from now, and seeing where it's going to get to. All right, well, let's do. I think we have time for the using Rekognition, and I want to give the remaining 10 minutes for that, and I think we'll have to do the other things another day. But let me queue up the Rekognition transition. Here it goes. Okay, so I'm clearing up my screen here. So let's go back to our view here. I'll make this a bit bigger. So we've got a stream, and this stream is referencing this little mini episode that I made where we're going over, just a news article on Hacker News, and we've got all those things there. So let's go over how we would kind of post-process this. So we've got one segment there. We need to make another segment. And this is, let's call this segment Java commentary. And this is forcing me to make this of type segment 9995. Adding the stream task. This will populate well, demo stream. And then we'll call this Java commentary. Okay. Save that. And then we'll make one more. Clean that up a bit. Okay. Segment. And now this will make sense in a second. Wrap up. Okay. We're going to make this a segment. So the segments are things that we've planned in advance. And they have a title. We'll call it Java commentary. This one is going to be, we'll save that. Link it to the parent. Oops. We need to call this a segment. We need to link it to the parent task. Let's see. Demo stream. There we go. That should be what we need. Oh, I forgot the, let's see, where is it? One second, I must have forgot a field here. Because I have this view. Oh, I think that what's happened. Let me disable this filter quickly. I want to make sure that this works exactly how I want it to. Okay. So we're in the segment view. Oh, yeah, that's what it is. I forgot the... Now I can turn my filter back on. So we'll filter by the episode number as 9995. Okay. Sorry for a little bit of setup. Yeah. Now it's here. We'll call this wrap up. These are all in progress. So our previous automation should have, and so let's say we've gone through the show. This one's complexity. We're going to give this a 1. This one is simplicity. We're going to give this a 5. Let's do a refresh. Our other automation will have run, and we should have these transitions. Oh, and this is important. We want the order that we're going to go through them is 2 and 3, and let's also give them URLs to have something to reference, and let's have that one be that URL. Okay, that sounds good. Okay, so say we've done this live stream and it's all set. Then what I would do, and this part's still manual because StreamYard doesn't have an API, is that I would set this recorded S3 URI field. Now I'm going to set this to this. Here we go. Set that here. Recorded S3 URI. Okay, that's happy with that now. So now when I move this from, so say it was in the recorded state, because actually I think some of my automation, I want to make sure, okay, it was ready and then we recorded it. And so now that it's in the recorded state, the automation is going to fire, which is going to launch a Rekognition job. And what Rekognition is going to do is it's going to look for all those segments, and it's going to figure out how many segments were in the show. And then if the amount of discrete clips it found matches the segments. So in this case, it will find 3 like this. It'll look for this pattern. It'll look for a black frame, and then that transition video, and then some amount of content, a black frame, the transition video, and then some amount of content. If it finds the same amount that we've already pre-planned, it's going to make a highlight that matches to that. So let's refresh. Yeah. And if we go to an overall view, we should see that start to work. I think there they are. So, oh, cool. Okay, right. So what ended up happening, and it seems like we got it just on the cusp of an update there. Okay, so what it did, and let's go to the highlight view, and this will make a lot more sense. So this is 9995. Okay, so what we're seeing here is we've got, this is the cool thing. Rekognition populated these fields. I'll zoom in a little bit more. Rekognition populated the fact that this happened here at 35 seconds, 10 milliseconds, and it ended at 3:11:08. And so now if we go over to our video and we go to a certain timestamp, and let's see, what was it? We'll go to 0:35.
There we go.
That's it. So, and now if we go to the next one, so that the next one, so see, our transition segment's about 10 seconds. So this one ended at 11, and this next one starts at 28. So the way that works in the background, and I'll show you the script here when we're getting close to our time. We have this use Rekognition. Now, Rekognition, it's kind of fascinating. The key here is that we're looking for this, what's called a technical cue. And the technical cue that we're looking for is that there's a black frame here. And what this coverage percentage is saying is if this black frame is covering more than 60% of the screen. Now, if you dive into the documentation, one thing that's interesting is a black frame technical cue only works if there's also no audio. And StreamYard does a thing where when you trigger a transition, it tapers off the audio over about half a second. So that's why that black frame has to be a second long. If you had full control over the video, you could just do it for, I don't know, a couple of frames. But it's a bit extra long at the moment because I'm compensating for that audio taper off to make sure we get a little piece of it where there's no audio.
Stephen, if we can take just 1 minute to tell the audience a little bit more about Rekognition, because I'm not sure we've actually covered that in depth.
Oh, sure. Sorry, I got so excited I kind of jumped ahead. Sorry.
Just very quickly, Rekognition is actually a suite of API that deals specifically with both image and video related AI services. That could be anything from detecting people, detecting faces, detecting sentiment, detecting not safe for work kind of content. So there are a lot of very interesting things that you can do with Rekognition. They have a very vast set of API that are there to be leveraged. So go check it out.
So this one in particular is called the Rekognition Segment API. And what it's doing is it's detecting, I'm sorry, I got so excited and I was also watching the clock. And I got this and it worked.
It always happens to us.
So yeah, what you do is you give it a file in a bucket and you tell it what to look for. And in this case, we're using a technical cue of type black frame. And then it will, once this job runs, it will broadcast out to an SNS topic when it's finished. And then so this is actually using that two function paradigm where one of them starts it and then another one is waiting for the result to then update it.
Yeah.
But the neat thing is, and that's one thing I've seen through this whole automation process when you're making these webhooks is you really want to have that pairing. You don't want webhooks to be synchronous. And most of your webhook providers don't want that either. And ClickUp says, if you make a webhook that takes a minute, they're going to disable that automation.
Yeah. Completely understand.
So, so this is Rekognition. I'm working on a blog post that'll kind of show all this stuff and have a repository that you can play with in dev spaces and deploy the automation stack in SAM You just have to fill out your AWS variables, and then you can basically have a very similar stack. But the idea is, and we'll have to go over this next time, but now that we've got these highlights, I'll just give a quick preview. So when we have these highlights, this is saying, here's the full length of the segment. Now on LinkedIn, you can do a 10-minute video as a highlight, but on Twitter, you can only do 60 seconds. So what we do is we have a preview highlight. So if we did, and again, I'm doing this blind, but if we do, if we start at 35, but then we want to end it at 1 minute and 15, that'll be okay. Okay, so we've got that. And then let's jump into this one, and we'll add a thumbnail because we need a thumbnail. Let's see. Thumbnail image. Upload the file. This will be episode 17. There we go. This will be the thumbnail for our video. Is that. And then if I move this over to in progress, then this is going to then take these parameters and it's going to render them in ShotStack into these videos that we can then share out on YouTube, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and it'll make the full version for LinkedIn and it'll make the shortened version for Twitter. Let's see how that's going. That will run. We'll have to do that next time because I know it's 10. Yep. We're already 2 minutes past. But yeah, that's how we use Rekognition to do this segment analysis, and this has been a real time saver because the first 13, 14 episodes, it was really just moving. Is in VLC with my notepad and writing down these timestamps and getting that to work. It was time consuming. But if you can control your transition videos and have that black frame, then you can basically make Rekognition do all that work for you. The Rekognition segment analysis API. All right. Well, I think
thanks so much, Stephen, for walking us through that. And I know that there's tons more to go through, but look forward to the blog posts as well.
Yeah, I'll get that finished up and posted along with some code, and then we need to. I think we have to do a part 2 and maybe a part 3 of this. And I guess that's what I realized is there's so much there, and there's a lot of little tasks like getting the thumbnail lined up, making sure the thumbnail is ready when I want to make the highlights. And that was a problem I ran into earlier. Is I'd be all ready to go. I said, "Oh, I forgot to ask the designer to make the thumbnails," and then so that would be a 24-hour turnaround on there. And so being able to have all this flow controlled and all these reminders in place to add this structure, it's been really fun. And using dev spaces and dev flows because it makes it really easy to just have these quick functions that. I couldn't think of a faster way to get a Lambda function just sitting out there on the public internet than using a dev spaces template.
Couldn't agree more. Anyway, thank you so much for the wonderful episode. And the audience, please feel free to subscribe, leave us a comment, let us know what else you would like to know. We will see you soon next week.
Yep. Let's do next week. Maybe we'll just do the part 2 next week.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks again. And I'll cue the end roll. Bye-bye. Here we go. I'm going to cue the credits, and there we go.
Is your AWS public cloud bill growing? While most solutions focus on visibility, CloudFix saves you 10 to 20% on your AWS bill by finding and implementing AWS recommended fixes that are 100% safe. There's zero downtime and zero degradation in performance. We've helped organizations save millions of dollars across tens of thousands of AWS instances. Interested in seeing how much money you can save?